This is Erhai Lake, the mother lake for Dali people. For years, the water has been breeding the people living by the lakeside.
Not yet there like its original form, but the quick comeback of Erhai Lake in China from being heavily polluted to being rescued was incredible.
But at the same time, human activities also take a toll on the water quality. So these volunteers have been sent out twice a week to clear out the waste from the water.
Imagine taking out over 100,000 tons of waste and manure from what was once a pristine lake. Scientists and experts are in shock to see the results of the massive plan. The damage has been done, but it will never be over for the environment, especially to Erhai, a living postcard and a majestic backdrop to nearby cities. The rise and fall of a national treasure. Erhai Lake wasn't always in trouble. In fact, for centuries, it was the lifeblood of the communities around it. With its breathtaking mountain backdrop and sparkling blue waters, it supported local fishermen, provided irrigation for farmland, and served as a cultural and spiritual touchstone for the people of Yunnan. But by the late 20th century, things started to go downhill, fast. In a notable cleanup operation, approximately 23,000 tons of algae and other overgrowth linked to pollution were removed from Erhai Lake. To address agricultural runoff, local enterprises collect and process over 140,000 metric tons of livestock and poultry manure annually. Since 2015, nearly 6 billion yuan, or approximately $890, have been invested in developing a comprehensive water disposal system. This system includes 12 water treatment plants serving over 370 villages, with a daily sewage treatment capacity of 210,000 cubic meters. The primary culprit? Agriculture and wastage. In particular, the large-scale cultivation of a special kind of garlic known as single-bulb garlic, which became popular in the region due to its high market value. This crop boom led to an explosion in fertilizer and pesticide use around the lake's perimeter. Add to that the untreated sewage and wastewater from nearby towns and tourism-related development, and Erhai's ecosystem began to buckle under the pressure. Algal blooms, thick, green, and foul-smelling, started appearing, choking the oxygen out of the water and making life miserable for aquatic species and humans alike. By the early 2000s, Erhai was in serious trouble. It wasn't quite dead, but it was close. The lake that once teemed with fish had become murky and smelly. Tourists were turned off, and locals began to feel the economic and health impacts of the declining water quality. Something had to change. While these practices were meant to increase economic gain, they ultimately compromised the very ecosystem that supported traditional livelihoods. Ironic, right? It did not end there. The local fishery practices shifted from sustainable small-scale fishing to more industrialized methods, often involving the use of banned chemicals and electric shocks to increase catches. These methods not only depleted fish stocks, but also disrupted the reproductive cycles of many aquatic species and contributed to the ecological imbalance of the lake. Overfishing and pollution combined to reduce biodiversity, which further weakened the resilience of the lake's ecosystem. Traditional knowledge about the lake's rhythms and needs was often ignored or overridden by commercial motives, leading to a profound loss of harmony between the community and the natural world. The government's regulatory efforts have been inconsistent and, at times, too little too late. Although there have been campaigns to clean up the lake, including temporary shutdowns of lakeside businesses and restrictions on farming practices, these interventions have often failed to address the root causes of pollution. Moreover, some locals viewed these regulations as punitive rather than collaborative, leading to tension between environmental authorities and local residents. Without a long-term and participatory approach, The cleanup efforts have struggled to reverse the deep damage already done. Scientists to the rescue. In 2006, a major turning point arrived in the form of a comprehensive restoration project, spearheaded by Professor Kong Hainan from Shanghai Jiao Tong University. Kong and his team didn't just show up with a set of generic solutions. They spent time studying the lake, its watershed, and the communities that depended on it. Their approach was all about targeting the actual sources of pollution, rather than just trying to treat the symptoms. First, they identified the biggest polluters: excessive fertilizer use, runoff from farms, and poorly managed wastewater. Then, they got to work on fixing those root issues. Farmers were given incentives, and eventually, regulations, to reduce chemical use and adopt more sustainable agricultural practices. Some farming areas close to the lake were even converted into wetlands to act as natural filters for runoff. Waste management systems were overhauled, and new wastewater treatment plants were built to handle both residential and tourism-related waste. The project didn't stop at infrastructure. Education played a huge role too. Local communities were engaged through awareness campaigns about how their daily habits affected the lake. Tourists were encouraged to respect the natural surroundings, and businesses were held to stricter environmental standards. Why did the lake end in its worst state, by the way? What was once a wonder? Before things got messy and the pollution rolled in, Lake Erhai was seriously something else. It had this calm, magical vibe, like nature just decided to show off for a bit. The water was insanely clear, almost like you could see straight through it to the bottom. And on calm days, it looked like someone laid a giant mirror on the ground. The sky, the clouds, even the mountains, it all just bounced off the lake like some kind of natural trick. People around the lake lived super close to it, like they actually respected it. You'd see fishermen out early in these narrow wooden boats, gently paddling across the glassy water. Some of them even used cormorants to catch fish. Yeah, birds. It was kind of wild but cool to watch. On the shore, women in bright clothes would be doing laundry, chatting away as they worked. Everything just felt peaceful and real. No one was rushing around. It wasn't touristy or artificial. It was just life. And let me tell you, Lake Erhai changed with the seasons in the best way. Spring brought a sea of cherry blossoms that made the whole place feel like a dream. In summer, the lotus flowers popped up everywhere, and they looked so perfect you'd swear they weren't real. Even winter had its charm. The lake got a little quieter, a little moodier, but still just as stunning. It always had this peaceful energy that made you want to slow down and just be there. The colors were unreal, too. Mornings were all golden and soft, like the lake was glowing. Then came the deep blues of midday, and in the evening, wow! Sunsets turned everything into shades of purple, orange, and pink that seemed to melt right into the water. You could sit there for hours doing absolutely nothing and feel like that was exactly what you were supposed to be doing. There was magic everywhere if you paid attention. Dragonflies zipping across the surface, little fish flashing below the water, the gentle splash of waves on the rocks. It was all so simple and beautiful. People didn't take it for granted. They lived with the lake, not on top of it. It gave them food, peace, beauty, and they gave back by treating it with care. The biodiversity was amazing. The lake supported a whole web of creatures, from tiny organisms invisible to the naked eye to fish, birds, plants, and even animals that depended on the lake for food and shelter. It was like a living, breathing world all on its own. If you spent just a little time around the lake, you'd realize how full of life it really was. Fish were probably the biggest stars of the show. There were so many native species swimming around in Lake Erhai, like carp, silverfish, and the famous Erhai golden line barbel. A lot of these fish were unique to the region. Some of them weren't found anywhere else in the world. Local fishermen used to know the lake like the back of their hand. They'd tell you where certain fish liked to gather, what time of year they came out in bigger numbers, and even which species tasted best depending on the season. It wasn't just fishing, it was knowledge passed down through generations. And it wasn't just fish doing their thing. The lake was a paradise for birds, especially migratory ones. In winter, birds from as far away as Siberia would make a stop at Lake Erhai. It became this massive bird-gathering spot, like a giant pit stop in the sky. You'd see flocks of seagulls, herons, egrets, and even rare birds like black-necked cranes. Locals would watch them glide across the sky or skim the lake for fish. It was peaceful and kind of poetic, watching birds fly free over this huge, calm lake. Beneath the water and along the shoreline, there were countless types of plants. Aquatic plants like reeds, lotus, and water lilies lined the edges, creating little green worlds full of frogs, insects, and nesting birds. The lotus flowers were especially stunning in the summer, with their big green leaves floating on the surface and pink blossoms stretching toward the sun. These plants did more than just look pretty. They helped keep the lake clean by filtering the water and providing shelter for small animals. The whole thing was like a balanced system, where everything helped everything else. Even the insects had a role. Dragonflies and damselflies flitted above the water like little fairies. They laid their eggs in the shallows, and their larvae helped keep mosquito populations in check. It's the kind of thing you might not notice unless you're really paying attention, but it all added up to a lake that was full of harmony. You had predators and prey, big animals and small ones, plants that filtered the water and bugs that helped clean it up. It was all part of the same cycle. What made the biodiversity in Lake Erhai so special wasn't just the number of species. It was the way everything was connected. Fish fed on the plankton, birds ate the fish, people caught the fish and used plants from the lake, and the plants helped keep the water clean so that the fish and birds could thrive. It was a natural chain that had been working for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. People lived alongside it, not separate from it. And you know what happens when people neglect nature's limits? Are the people to be blamed? The city of Dali and its people. Tucked between the Kangshan Mountains and the sparkling waters of Lake Erhai, it's a small city with a big personality. Whether you're wandering the cobbled streets of the old town or hiking through the mountain trails, Dali has this unique energy that blends nature, history, and a laid-back vibe that's hard to find anywhere else. The heart of Dali is its ancient town, a maze of narrow alleys, whitewashed buildings with carved wooden doors, and stone-paved roads that seem to whisper stories from centuries ago. The architecture is heavily influenced by the Bai people, the local ethnic minority group, and you'll see their style everywhere, especially in the delicate, black-tiled roofs and painted floral designs on the walls. The old town is full of cozy cafes, quirky shops, traditional tea houses, and quiet courtyards where time feels like it's slowed down. It's touristy, sure, but it somehow doesn't feel fake. It just feels lived in and loved. Step outside the old town, and you'll see a totally different side of Dali. The new parts of the city have all the modern comforts, apartment buildings, shopping centers, and busy roads, but they still carry that same relaxed pace. Even with all the development, Dali hasn't lost its soul. Maybe it's the mountains in the background or the lake nearby, but life here just feels a bit calmer, like nobody's in too much of a rush. It's a city where you can take a breath, and not feel like the world is spinning too fast. Nature plays a huge role in what makes Dali so special. The Kangshan Mountains rise dramatically behind the city, covered in thick green forests and hidden waterfalls. Locals and travelers alike hike the trails, soaking in views of the lake from high up. And then there's Lake Erhai, big, beautiful, and still full of charm despite the environmental struggles it's faced. Riding a bike around the lake is one of the most popular things to do, and for good reason. Every turn brings a new view: rice paddies, fishing villages, wildflowers, and wide-open skies. Culturally, Dali is rich and colorful. The Bai people have a strong presence here, and their traditions, music, clothing, festivals are a big part of what gives the city its character. You might catch a local performance in a town square or hear traditional instruments being played as you stroll past a temple. There's also a creative streak in Dali. A lot of artists, musicians, and free spirits have made their home here over the years, giving the city a slightly bohemian, open-minded atmosphere. It's the kind of place where people come to slow down, get inspired, and maybe stay a little longer than they planned. One of the most significant ways the people of Dali have contributed to the pollution of Lake Erhai is through the unchecked expansion of tourism and the construction boom that accompanied it. As Dali transformed into a hotspot for domestic and international visitors, a rush to build guest houses, hotels, and restaurants along the lakeshore took place. In many cases, these establishments were constructed without proper sewage systems, leading to direct discharge of untreated wastewater into the lake. This surge in human activity overwhelmed the lake's natural capacity to process waste, leading to increased levels of nitrogen and phosphorus that triggered eutrophication, a process where excessive nutrients lead to algal blooms and a decline in oxygen levels, endangering aquatic life. Agriculture has also played a destructive role in the pollution of Lake Erhai. Farmers around the lake, in an effort to increase yields and profit, turned to chemical fertilizers and pesticides in large quantities. These substances, when washed by rains into the lake, further fueled eutrophication and harmed the aquatic ecosystem. Additionally, intensive farming around the lake led to soil erosion, sedimentation, and the degradation of wetlands that once acted as natural filters for lake water. The large-scale cultivation of cash crops like garlic, which require heavy pesticide use, only exacerbated the situation. A second life for Erhai Lake. So yes, over the last few decades, Erhai has gone from being a crystal-clear alpine lake to a polluted shadow of itself. And now, thanks to a major restoration effort, it's once again becoming a symbol of what environmental recovery can look like when people commit to making it happen. By 2023, the transformation was undeniable. Water quality had improved dramatically, and biodiversity in the lake began to rebound. Fish populations returned. The algal blooms that once dominated the lake's surface became rare events instead of constant threats. Tourists came back in droves, not just to take in the views, but also to witness a real-world success story in ecological restoration. For the people living around Erhai, this change wasn't just about the environment, it was about quality of life. Cleaner water meant safer drinking water, healthier food, and more stable jobs in both agriculture and tourism. The ripple effect was enormous. While the progress is undeniable, the reality is that no environmental project is ever truly finished. The story of Erhai Lake is not just one of redemption. It is also one of constant vigilance, adaptation, and ongoing commitment. Despite the positive strides made, Erhai Lake continues to face a host of challenges. Chief among them is the looming threat of climate change. Rising global temperatures are altering the delicate balance of natural systems. In the case of Erhai, warmer weather can contribute to increased evaporation rates and disrupt the aquatic ecosystems that depend on a stable environment. Moreover, changing precipitation patterns can lead to irregular water levels, putting additional stress on both plant and animal life in and around the lake. Urban development presents another persistent concern. As nearby cities expand, the pressure on natural resources intensifies. Construction, infrastructure growth, and population increases all bring with them the risk of pollution, whether through runoff, sewage, or the destruction of wetlands that serve as natural filters. Even tourism, which has been both a blessing and a burden for the region, needs to be managed carefully to avoid repeating past mistakes. Without thoughtful planning and strict regulations, the lake could easily slip back into decline. To keep Erhai Lake healthy, continuous care is required. This means not only maintaining the measures that have already proven effective, such as wastewater treatment plants, wetland restoration, and limits on agricultural pollutants, but also introducing new strategies to deal with emerging threats. Scientific research must guide policy, and policies must be enforced with consistency and transparency. But perhaps most importantly, the preservation of the lake depends on long-term dedication from both the government and the people who live in the surrounding communities. Local engagement plays a crucial role in the success of any environmental initiative. In the case of Erhai Lake, grassroots movements, educational campaigns, and community-driven conservation efforts have all been critical components of progress. When residents understand the value of the lake, not just as a scenic spot, but as a source of livelihood, culture, and biodiversity, they are more likely to support and sustain protective actions. The story of Erhai Lake offers a powerful lesson. While environmental degradation can seem overwhelming, meaningful change is possible. It requires time, resources, scientific expertise, and above all, people who care deeply about the natural world. The lake's partial recovery proves that damage can be reversed when there is collective will and coordinated action. However, the job is far from over. The future of Erhai Lake hinges on the choices made today, and the understanding that nature's resilience must be matched by human responsibility. The revival and its national significance. Nestled among the Kangshan Mountains, Erhai Lake has long been a symbol of natural beauty and cultural heritage. But in recent decades, this picturesque lake faced a dire crisis. Yet today, Erhai's remarkable turnaround is being hailed as more than just a local triumph. It's emerging as a model for lake restoration efforts across China. The Erhai model, as it's come to be known, offers a comprehensive and pragmatic approach to environmental restoration. It doesn't rely on a single solution, but instead weaves together modern technology, traditional ecological knowledge, community involvement, and strong policy enforcement. This integrated approach has proven effective in restoring the health of the lake and preserving it for future generations. One of the key pillars of the Erhai model is the application of modern technology. Real-time water quality monitoring, the construction of advanced wastewater treatment plants, and the use of environmentally friendly agricultural practices have all played a role in curbing pollution. Digital platforms have been employed to track environmental indicators, enabling authorities to respond quickly to emerging threats. Equally important is the revival and application of traditional wisdom. Local communities, particularly the Bai ethnic group who have lived by the lake for centuries, possess valuable knowledge about sustainable fishing, farming, and resource management. By integrating this indigenous knowledge with scientific methods, a more holistic and culturally sensitive restoration process was achieved. Community engagement has also been central to Erhai's revival. Authorities implemented policies that involved farmers, fishers, and local businesses in restoration efforts. Incentives were provided to switch from polluting practices to sustainable ones. Ecotourism was promoted in place of mass tourism, creating economic alternatives that aligned with conservation goals. Public education campaigns helped foster a sense of stewardship among residents, making environmental protection a shared responsibility. However, none of these efforts would have been successful without strong and consistent policy enforcement. In a bold move, the government shut down thousands of polluting businesses and imposed strict limits on construction and farming around the lake. Such measures were not without controversy, as they impacted economic activity in the short term. But over time, the benefits became clear. Water quality improved, biodiversity began to return, and the lake started to heal. Eutrophication, industrial discharge, and agricultural runoff continue to plague these bodies of water. As such, the Erhai model is being closely studied and adapted elsewhere. It serves as a living example that environmental restoration, while complex and demanding, is entirely possible with the right blend of science, tradition, public support, and governance. China's rapid industrial and agricultural growth over the past few decades has lifted millions out of poverty, but it has also come at great environmental cost. Water pollution is one of the country's most pressing ecological issues. In this context, Erhai stands as a beacon of hope, a vivid reminder that with thoughtful planning, substantial investment, and a commitment to enforcement, even severely damaged ecosystems can be brought back to life. The lessons of Erhai are clear. Restoration is not about quick fixes. It requires a long-term vision, multi-stakeholder cooperation, and a willingness to make difficult choices. But the payoff, cleaner water, healthier communities, and more resilient ecosystems, is well worth the effort. As China continues to pursue its goals of ecological civilization and sustainable development, Erhai's story offers inspiration and guidance for the road ahead. Most importantly, Erhai's revival comes at a critical time. Across China, many other lakes, including Dianqi Lake in Kunming and Taihu Lake in Jiangsu, face similar challenges. Let's peek at the situation before we end this video. China's rapid industrialization and urban expansion over recent decades have brought unprecedented economic growth, but they have also exerted heavy pressure on the country's natural environment. Two of the nation's most significant freshwater lakes, Dianqi Lake in Yunnan Province and Taihu Lake in Jiangsu Province, illustrate the profound environmental challenges facing China's inland waters. Both lakes have suffered from severe pollution, impacting ecosystems, public health, and local economies. Despite ongoing restoration efforts, these lakes continue to grapple with complex issues, underscoring the difficulties of balancing development with environmental sustainability. Dianqi Lake, located near Kunming in Yunnan Province, China, is often referred to as the city's Dead Sea due to the severe environmental degradation it has suffered over the past few decades. Once a vibrant freshwater lake spanning over 300 square kilometers, Dianqi was historically known for its clear waters, rich biodiversity, and importance to local communities. It served as a vital source of drinking water, irrigation for agriculture, and a habitat for numerous species of fish and migratory birds. However, rapid urbanization, industrial expansion, and agricultural runoff have pushed the lake into a critical state of ecological collapse, turning it into a symbol of environmental neglect and the consequences of unchecked development. The origins of Dianqi's crisis can be traced back to Kunming's rapid growth as an economic and industrial hub. As the city expanded, factories and industrial plants sprung up along the lake's perimeter, discharging untreated or inadequately treated wastewater directly into the water. Simultaneously, the surge in population increased domestic sewage and solid waste production, much of which ended up in the lake due to insufficient waste management infrastructure. Agricultural activities in the lake's watershed exacerbated the problem by introducing large quantities of fertilizers and pesticides into the water system. These pollutants have led to a process called eutrophication, where nutrient overload causes excessive growth of algae and aquatic plants, depleting oxygen levels and creating dead zones, inhospitable to aquatic life. One of the most visible consequences of this pollution has been the dramatic decline in water quality and biodiversity. Dianchi Lake's once clear waters have become murky and greenish, often covered by thick mats of algae during the summer months. Fish populations have plummeted, with many native species either endangered or extinct in the area. Migratory birds that relied on the lake as a stopover or breeding ground have drastically reduced in number, signaling the loss of an important ecological niche. Beyond the environmental damage, the lake's deterioration has impacted local communities' livelihoods, especially fishermen and farmers who depended on the lake's resources. The contamination has also posed serious health risks to residents, as pollutants in the water have been linked to various diseases and unsafe drinking water conditions. Recognizing the severity of the problem, the Chinese government and local authorities have launched several initiatives aimed at restoring Dianchi Lake. Efforts have included upgrading sewage treatment facilities, relocating polluting industries away from the lake's vicinity, and implementing stricter regulations on agricultural runoff. Large-scale ecological restoration projects have also been undertaken, such as wetland restoration, dredging accumulated sediments, and reintroducing native plant and animal species to revive the lake's ecosystem. Despite these measures, the recovery has been slow and challenging due to the complex nature of the pollution and the continued pressure from urban development. Moreover, the coordination among different governmental departments and stakeholders remains a hurdle, as comprehensive lake management requires balancing economic interests with environmental protection. The crisis of Dianchi Lake serves as a stark reminder of the environmental costs associated with rapid industrialization and urban growth in China and around the world. It highlights the urgent need for sustainable development practices that prioritize long-term ecological health alongside economic progress. The lake's plight also underscores the importance of community involvement and public awareness in environmental conservation efforts. Many local residents and environmental activists have taken part in cleanup campaigns and educational programs, advocating for stronger protection of the lake and its surroundings. Their efforts contribute to fostering a culture of environmental stewardship that is essential for the success of restoration initiatives. A lake under environmental stress. Taihu Lake, located in the highly industrialized Yangtze River Delta, is China's third-largest freshwater lake and an economic powerhouse. It supports millions of residents and serves as a critical water source for agriculture, industry, and drinking water. Like Dianchi, Taihu has faced severe eutrophication caused by nutrient overloads from wastewater discharge, industrial effluents, and intensive agriculture. The lake's shallow depth and slow water circulation exacerbate pollution buildup. Periodic cyanobacterial, blue-green algae blooms have caused water shortages and public health scares, including a notable event in 2007 when a toxic algal bloom contaminated the drinking water supply for millions in Wuxi City. Restoration of Taihu involves a multi-pronged approach: upgrading wastewater treatment plants, restricting industrial emissions, regulating agricultural inputs, and improving watershed management. The Chinese government has also promoted the relocation or closure of heavily polluting factories. In addition, innovative techniques such as aeration systems to increase oxygen levels in the lake and biological treatments using algae-eating fish are being trialed. Despite these efforts, Taihu's restoration remains an uphill battle. The sheer scale of the lake and the intensity of surrounding economic activity create persistent pollution sources. The governance complexity, overlapping jurisdictions of multiple cities and provinces, often leads to fragmented policies and enforcement gaps. Furthermore, balancing economic growth with environmental protection remains a sensitive political and social issue. Do you think China will restore Erhai to its original state? Share us your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel for more.